Blaze is just a booze hound. I'm sure Blaze did everything he could do one way or the other. It's free if it's free, but nobody would share cocaine with Blaze. They give him a drink instead, and he'll still perform. And also, this is my personal opinion. I think that. Well, I've talked to a number of people in work in rehab programs, and they say everybody that comes in for anything, the first thing they got to do is get them off of booze, because that's the thing that maintains all of this.
I don't think I ever saw him sober. I don't think I ever saw him that he hadn't at least had a beer or two, not drunk necessarily, but never sober. I mean. Dry is one thing, sober's another. Sobriety takes a few years,
I think that it just got out of control with him, and I think there's a lot of people that have that thing where you have a point where you drink and you go over the line, and then your aggressive tendencies and your give a shit goes right out the window, and I think that's what happened with him, and I think he just did it all the time. So from when I first met him, he was kind of, easygoing, happy kind of guy. And then toward the end, I've seen him in a lot more arguments and stuff. So
you couldn't talk him out of it. I mean, if he was really down, he was doing massive amounts of drugs and alcohol and would get real belligerent. And I think that's when he scared a lot of people, was he would just get, it was like he was in the depths of hell. And you didn't really know what to do to help him, just sort of stay out of his way and, try to be there if he needed anything. But he usually he'd just sort of go off when he was feeling real bad. But, it's like he would be in a really bad mood. And I think that's when he'd get into some of the fights he got into. And, if somebody didn't think that he was as good as he knew he was, and they weren't being respectful of him, he could really get in their face and make their lives really miserable. But I just remember a lot of times where it made me sad to see how depressed he was, because he wouldn't, trying to figure out where he was going to go to next, just wanting somebody important to record something of his. He wanted that more than anybody I've ever met in my life. It's like I hear people say, well, I really wanted this for a long time. Well, Blaze bled it, ate it, drank it. That was him. It was utmost important. There wasn't anything any more important than that. And it saddened him a lot when he wasn't getting due respect, or somebody would badmouth him or wouldn't let him in their club, even though he'd done really crappy things to him, or gotten really drunk and belligerent and stuff. He just, it was like there were demons there that he couldn't shake.
And I hear so much about people talking about the two sides of Blaze, and I think that the way I look at it, I think there was only one Blaze, and that was the happy guy that, was always smiling, and everybody was always, happy being around him, and people gravitated to him and flocked to him. And the other Blaze that wasn't so much fun, that really wasn't Blaze, that was just his disease. He had the same disease that I've got. He was an alcoholic, and that was the symptoms of his disease. That wasn't who Blaze was or what he was, or didn't have anything to do with Blaze or Deputy or Mike.
I don't know. Thought a lot about it, about my own self and my own drinking and everything like that. And it was like Bill Wilson was one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, along with Dr. Bob. And when Bill Wilson first co-founded AA, he was looking at the why. And Carl Jung, the noted psychologist, was pretty popular back then. And he wrote to Carl Jung and asked him, what is it with this, And it appeared in the Grapevine, AA's little magazine that called The Grapevine. and it had Bill's original letter to Carl Jung, and then it had Carl Jung's reply to him. But essentially what he said was like, there's an inner need within us all to connect with the spirit, you know, and we got our spirits out of the bottle, those spirits, and that satisfied this craving or this need within us to connect with the spirit or something. I don't know, and makes a lot of sense. Well, it makes as much sense as anything. There's no rhyme there. Back when I was drinking, I had 100 good reasons why I drank. I had at least 100 good reasons why it was okay. But now that I've been clean and sober for a few years, I can't think of one. I can't think of one reason. No matter how bad a situation, there's no situation that's so bad that you can't make it worse by having a couple of beers, you know.
Alcoholism is it's a chemical condition in your body, and the way I look at mine is I think everybody's got this switch in their head, you know, and that when you drink alcohol and you have a couple drinks and you start to get that fuzzy, warm feeling and you start to get a little buzz, you know, most people's switch goes that way and says, okay, well, that's probably enough. Or maybe you need to slow down. My switch, because I'm an alcoholic, goes, I got to have all of this shit I can get my hands on from now to the end of time, you know. And I think when you're an alcoholic, your body just chemically processes alcohol differently in such a way that you lose all ability to make any conscious decisions about how much you drink and when you start and when you stop, and you lose the power of choice. Blaze had it. I've got it. I'll never be cured. I'll always have it. I always know that if I take a drink, eventually I'm going to lose all power of choice. I saw Blaze, you know, he was older than me and a few years ahead of me in the progression of the disease, and he's one of the things that helped me get sober, you know, seeing him, the things that he did, and seeing him, you know, spitting up blood and still have, you know, the half a gallon of vodka in his hand, and, you know, hey, maybe you should not drink anymore today, you know, and he'd just keep chugging on the half a gallon of vodka. And, you know, when my disease started really progressing, some of the memories of him were the strongest ones that I had. And
Well, I've known a number of alcoholics in my life, and I just think he just deteriorated. That's all. He just his system was always full of alcohol, no matter how much he had, because he had the residue. And you know, 2 beers or 100 beers, it was the same thing. He was always, you know, really under the influence.
He could drink more than any motherfucker I ever saw. I mean, like I said, I've seen him drink half gallon of vodka, and you wouldn't know he'd had a sip, you know. But then if he took 4 more sips, then you knew he drank 5 gallons of vodka. He was a fucking asshole after that. There was a break point, just a little spot there. And I think that was, I don't know, man, I think that was his part of his genius, part of his, I don't know how to explain it. He, you know, he could live within a spot, but then once he got too fucked up after that, then he wasn't Blaze anymore, because he was a great guy. I mean, he was just a loving person. And then, like I said, after he got, you know, to that spot, that it awakened the bad shit that happened to him earlier in his life or something. I don't know. Because he didn't get really into that. Didn't say a whole bunch about, you know, what it was. So I don't know.
I think that it just got out of control with him, and I think there's a lot of people that have that thing where you have a point where you drink and you go over the line, and then your aggressive tendencies and your give a shit goes right out the window. And I think that's what happened with him, and I think he just did it all the time. So from when I first met him, he was kind of, easygoing, happy kind of guy, and then toward the end, I've seen him in a lot more arguments and stuff. So.
How did you become an alcoholic? And he said, it's like, when does a cucumber become a pickle? It's after a certain amount of time, it's a pickle and it's no longer a cucumber. Right? So there's no way to, and I think it's true of every, I can't say of every alcoholic, but it's a process like that. Something begins to happen, and suddenly you turn around one day and your best friend is an alcoholic out of control.
Well,
and then you can see it happen, that it had been happening all this time, if you're not an alcoholic yourself.
And it's like with any addiction, there doesn't have to be anything to make it start back up again. It's just the addiction kicks back in. And he never really quit drinking completely. I mean, he was still drinking. He just wasn't guzzling, like Larry said. He was sipping. And
yeah, but when you get when you put your toe into the water, you're gonna go swimming. There's no buts or ifs. You get your toe wet, man, you're going for the deep end of the pool, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Ain't got nothing to do with really nothing around you. It has to do with what's inside of you. It's like I was saying earlier. It's like I could be on the road and be people hugging me and petting my back and nice hotels and flying everywhere and rock and roll, blah blah blah, and be totally clean to make sure the show went on. And get back home, get back in the hotel room, and just try to flat kill myself with drugs, because it was between me and the demon. It wasn't between nothing else.
Yep.
So that's where you got to come to that place to where you kiss the monster on the nose, and then he kind of disappears. But if you don't kiss him on the nose and you just feed him, keep feeding him, he'll get you. So.
Yep, he got them.
Yeah, he got them, man. Whew. What a drag.
False sense of well-being. I mean, after 2, 3, 4 beers, things, no matter, they didn't seem as bad, I mean, you could kind of get off into this hazy existence, and with me, my problem, one of my biggest problems is I had no control. I mean, I couldn't stop once I started. Once I started drinking, I didn't quit until there wasn't any more, or until I passed out. And I think that's part of what alcoholism, people, there's light drinkers, social drinkers, heavy drinkers, and then there's full-blown alcoholics. And an alcoholic just has no control. It's like a disease, an obsession. And didn't really get a whole lot, back to your question, out of it, except I damn near killed myself and a few other people around me. I lost 2 families, 2 wives, and kids because of it.
I think Blaze was sick, and obviously, in the long run, looking at history, he was talented. There are other guys that I know and miss who were talented and injured themselves through chemical use and lack of food, lack of income, and excesses of all kinds.
I had an alcoholic father, so I am familiar with behavior, but you knew whatever he was doing, there was part of this planning involved getting his next drink. And much more calculating, manipulative. And less of him was there.
Many years ago, I first started getting on him about the alcoholism stuff. I started telling him, I said, Blaze, I like to drink as much as the next man, but you got to get, when your first drink of the day is a beer every day, you got to look at that a little bit. Oh, hell, I'm fine. Let's go get another six-pack, rah, 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 rah. And that's given the lifestyle we were living, and that was the way we were doing. But I was kind of concerned about it because I could see it was kind of starting to get a grip on his life. I think part of the trouble that he had with Kerrville and subsequent to that in musical venues had to do with his drinking and his recreational use of drugs. He'd get drunk sometime and just be intractable. He'd get drunk and dig his heels in on something and just refuse to move. Now, when he sobered up, he'd be a different person. But that seemed to be happening more and more. And I guess I was, to use the contemporary psychological term, an enabler. I bought beer. I mean, whenever we went out, I was always buying the beer. That's the thing is, back when I, got to know Blaze earlier, neither one of us had much. So we shared everything we had. Well, later on, I had a job and more resources. So I was every time I'd find him, I'd take him out for supper, and all the drinks and everything. And he was always going to pay me back.
When I look back on it, everything that he became happened here in Whitesburg, the person that he was and everybody knows him as.
Yeah.
The change happened here.
The good ones and the bad ones.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And it was also a descent into terrible alcoholism.
Yeah.
All the happy times, I believe that guy was drinking hard and harder as time went on.
Your life wasn't
But
easy.
he was a great presence at parties, and he enjoyed people. But that was alcoholic stuff.
Yeah.
With
Yeah,
hindsight.
but I don't. It got bad after he got to Austin. I think
That's
much worse
true.
than
I
here.
see. My
Yeah,
recollection is
the
he came back.
damage
From,
was
his
now-
worst times was when he was in Texas. He'd come back here to dry out and get, by drying out, he'd cut down to what, bottle of vodka and a case a day, or something like that. But he wasn't. My recollection is he'd come back from Texas. He was always fucked up, and he was always been on a tear and hadn't eaten and was in bad shape. And I thought that's where his heavy drinking got worse. But you are right about him always needing that social lubricant.
I think that Blaze probably, if he'd have lived, let me put it this way, probably would have been more prone to have eventually quit drinking than Towns. I think that he had a little bit more of a little bit more of a spiritual basis that, that's not always the solution to that problem, but it tends to kind of increase your chances a little bit. I think Towns had gone through some difficult things in spiritual aspects, even though he was, you don't write that kind of stuff without being in touch with some other elements, right? But I think that Blaze probably could have, taken the steps necessary. And he tended to be, I think that he was oftentimes not real happy with himself, after he'd really explode and, have those kind of incidences.
One of the last times I saw him was there, and he was way in his disease at that point and had a stack of albums sitting up on the bar, and he was trying to trade albums for beer, and he wanted me to, buy him some beer for some albums, and I wouldn't do it. It was kind of like you're sick, and I'm not going to help you get any sicker right now. And boy, he was calling me all kinds of, you fucking butt breath, and, that was one of his things. He was calling people a lot at that time butt breath, and you hate me, you're not my friend, and so I think that might have been the last time I actually talked to him.
I never had those negative feelings about him ever until his alcoholism dominated his life and his personality. up until that time, I was hopeful for him. I was happy for him. Everything, you know. He was a close friend.
It's insanity. It's clinical definition of insanity when you're under the influence of alcohol. So why does an insane person do what they do? I don't know. makes a lot of sense at the time, but after it's over with, like, I can't tell you. It's
That's perfect. No, that's what I was looking for, actually. Yeah.
one of the mysteries. You know, it's insanity. It is. I mean, clinically, you're not in your right mind. I mean, if you are, you got some bad booze. You know.
And that's what a lot of what the alcohol was for both of us. You know, it became our fuel. And what kept, you know, what we had to have to get up in the morning, and what we had to have to go to bed at night, and what we had to have to go to the mailbox, and you know, we had to have a drink so we could go have another drink.
Yeah, you can get up one morning and look out and go, wow, it's a beautiful blue sky. Let's use. You know, good enough reason.
Yeah.
And we were camping out at a lake, I don't know which one, but some lake in Austin. And Blaze and I, at the time, well, it wasn't just Blaze and I, but at the time we were pretty seriously into our demons, if you will. And we were talking about it. Both of us were genuinely concerned about that. And we were thinking, you know, how do we get out of this? You know, how do we, you know, this is getting bad. And Blaze was telling me, he said, there's nobody here that will walk us away from this. And I thought, there's a tune. So, I mean, that's actually how it started. We sat on a park bench on the other side of the lake, and as far as who contributed what, there's I'd have to play it for you, but there's the part where it goes into the chorus. He wrote a lot of that. Musically, I wrote the chord progression and the melody line, but that one part where it says, and when I'm high on a cliff looking down on all the love I've missed, that's it. And he certainly knew that.
But I mean, you can deal with it, and you know, you can mature with it and or whatever. But you either get a handle on it or it gets a handle on you. So I feel pretty fortunate that I found out that I had my problem when I did, and stopped. You know.
My ex-wife thought it was just because I didn't have any willpower and I didn't care, and I didn't love her and I didn't love my kids, and I didn't, I was selfish and self-centered. Well, I was selfish and self-centered, but I didn't have any power of choice. It was just completely out of my hands. As long as I had alcohol in my body, I didn't have a choice. Take the alcohol out, I got a choice,
How's it feel today?
It's great, I hadn't found it necessary to take a drink or use a drug in almost 2 years, and, beginning to learn what it's like to be happy and joyous and free. And I never had that before. I had no freedom. I was in a self-imposed prison.